Yeah. So once again, very good morning to all. So in our last sessions, we have seen some of the example programs, how we are going to create our servlet, like life cycle, or I can say how your init method and how your destroy method and how your service method work over there. And in another method or another example, we have seen our length of a given string using your do get, and as well as we have seen our third example is the area of circle using your do post method. And finally, we have gone through one more example, that is adding of your two numbers using your HTTP servlet interface. So these are some of the example programs we have seen. Now, as for today's session, we are going to focus on mainly what are the methods are involved to develop any interface, what are the methods we are using, and what do you mean by configuration of servlet, and what do you mean by context of your servlet. Like this, some of the methods we have, what type of servlet we had, how we are implementing. So these things we are going to discuss in this session. So as coming into first, the types of servlet. So servlet can be created in three different ways, right? Servlet can be created in three different ways. One is simply by implementing our servlet interface. So only with the help of servlet interface we can do it, right? And second method is using our generic servlet class. We can do it. That is nothing but inheriting. Inheriting means you know it already. No need to take the concept of inheritance. Inheritance is nothing but deriving the properties from one class to another class is called as inheritance. That is another possibility we had. And the third is inheriting the HTTP servlet class. So these are the three ways where we can write our servlet example, or I can say these are the types of servlets what we can use. But among these three, we mainly focus on the third method, or we'll just have more importance on this method compared with these two methods. The reason is it provides do get, do post, and do head. What it is, we can see a later. Don't worry about it. But just among these three, we are going to give more priority to this HTTP servlet class. But before going to that HTTP servlet class, we need to learn something about servlet interface and servlet generic servlet class. Then we are going to see finally about the HTTP servlet class. So first we'll come across implementation of servlet class, how you are going to generate a servlet example. We'll see with an example, right? So coming to servlet interface. So it's a interface. You know what is an interface? I discussed in my first session, I think so. Difference between method and interface, you know it, right? So servlet interface provides a common behavior to all the servlets. Means it's a common interface which we are using for all the servlets. And this servlet interface mainly defines methods. What are the methods we need? Right? It defines, but it will not implement. It defines. I'm reminding you once again. So servlet interface defines methods that all the servlets must to be implemented. I mean, suppose if we want to implement any servlet, what are the methods you need to actually? We need compulsory three methods. What are the three methods? Initialization method, that is the init method, what you call. Service method we need, and we need destroy method. So that methods what we needed that can be implemented by your servlet interface. So that can be defined by your servlet interface. And along with these three, it also going to define two more methods, what we call it as a non-cyclic methods. So cyclic methods is compulsory we need to define, but whatever the remaining two as a methods I'm discussing, they are not a mandatory. It's not a part of your cycle. So that's why totally we had a 5 methods which is defined by our servlet interface. And in these 5 methods, the 3 methods we call as the life cycle methods. What is that? To initialize, that already I told, and to provide the service to your servlet, which is taking a request from the client. And the last method is called a destroy method. So these 3 are called life cycle methods. And with these 3 life cycle methods, I told as a add on 2 more methods, we call it as a non-life cycle methods. But what are that? Just check it out. These are the methods we had it. So what are that? Public void init, as I told. So what it is, the purpose of this method is it is going to be used to initialize the servlet, that we know it, and it is lifecycle method of servlet, you know it. And where we are going to use all these things, we are going to invoke, or it's going to be, this method is going to be invoked by your web container only one time. Because why we need only one time? So initialization can be done one time, and destroy also we can done only one time. But the service method is number of requests are coming. If you are coming 10 requests, we need to call our service method 10 times. But we don't require to call our destroy in it 10 times. Only one is enough. So that is what the first method is saying about it. And coming into my second method, public void service method. As I told, what type of service it is providing? A request which is coming from the client, right? A request which is coming from the client, it takes a request by using a object or a request, and it's going to be respond to that particular request, right? So it is also be invoked each request by the web container only. So it is also be responding from the web container. This method is also be invoked by whom? Web container. And coming into my third method, you know what is the purpose of destroy? Once you have created your object, as I told, we need to free the memory. To make that memory free, we are going to use a method called destroy. And it is also invoked only one time, and it indicates servlet being destroyed. And these 3 methods what we are calling as life cycle of servlet methods. And coming into non-life cycle methods, 2 methods I am having. So what is the method name? Public servlet config, same, it's going to be used as servlet configuration. And get servlet config. So we are going to use this get servlet config in your web.xml only. So we are going to make a configuration of your servlet. And what it is going to do, it's going to return the object of, what object is going to return? Servlet config, right? It returns servlet config. And once you have configured your servlet, you need to get the information about it. So how you configured and what you had it. So like this, we are providing some configuration information in your deployment descriptor. That configuration information can be taken by another method. We call it as public string get servlet info. So information we are collecting, and it returns information about servlet, such as what is the copyright of that particular servlet and which version we are using and what is the writer. Just I am going to show you, don't worry. So this type of information is going to be provided by the last and final method we call as what? Public string get servlet information. So if you see one example, a program which we are going to use for your servlet interface. Just I want to show you that example program. Just give me a second. Hope everyone can able to see my program. Yes, please respond. Can you able to see my program? Is it visible to everyone? No. Okay, fine. So better I'm going to share one second, because that is a program. Yeah. So now you can able to see. Now you can able to see, right? Just give me a second. Yes, hope you can able to see. So now just look at here how you use all these five methods with this example program.
Sir,
So first,
sir,
yeah,
sir, please wait. Your screen is not visible.
sorry,
Your screen is not visible.
not visible.
Okay, okay, now it's visible. Wait, now it's visible.
Yeah, it takes some time. That's it. No issue. Now it's visible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So yeah, just if you see this example program of how your servlet interface basic implementation can be done. Look at here. I'm going to call my first class, and I told already the class first is implementing your servlet information, right? And here I am going to make it servlet config initially as a null, right? So this is our first method, init method. So what init method is used to initialize our servlet, initializing our servlet with the object of config, and whatever the config information you had, that you are going to pass using your this object, this dot config equal to config. And here once initialization has been done, you are going a message in the form of out.println or in the form of system.out, which is output message we are giving. First method you called it, right? Lifecycle method. And second method is, as I told, service method. So a service method is used to take the request, it is clearly here there, and responding to that particular request with the object of res. And if during that, if any type of exception has been raised, that can be thrown IO exception or servlet exception, whatever it may be, it can be throws an exception. And here whatever the content type you are using to display, or whatever the content is coming from the client, it can be in the form of text or HTML. You know it. No need to describe, because this is already everything we have seen in my previous examples. And this is a print and writer is a type of a method, or taking information from your what, the HTML, to get or to write some content over it with the help of an object out. And whatever the information you have taken with the object out, out is an object, so that is going to be print with the help of a out dot print, and whatever you had in the HTML. So here we don't require this everything. What we need is how we are applying all these five methods. First method is init here, and second method is a service method, where we are providing a service which taking a request and providing a response. And what is my third method? Once it has been done, I'm going to call my third method, which we call as a destroy. So once you call that method, immediately the servlet has been destroyed. Servlet means the object related to the particular thing. And we are going to, as I told, once the servlet has been defined, we need to get the configuration information about it. So that configuration information can be used with a return of config, because already you have configured some information here when you initialized your servlet, right? So that configuration information also be returned. And finally, I told already to you, get servlet information represents what is a copyright and what is the content you're using for that servlet. It can be written using this method. So these are the five methods mainly we focus on. First interface, what we call as servlet interface. Now coming into my second, what is my second? My second is generic class, which we are going to make it as generic servlet class. And here this generic servlet class implements servlet as well as servlet config as well as serializable interfaces, right? It makes three things. It can be implementing servlet config as well as serializable interfaces. And here it provides an implementation of all the methods except one method. What is that one method? Service method. Why, sir? Why it is not going to make your service method as implementation? Means it can be overridden. Just I can show with an example, don't worry. And a generic servlet class can handle any type of request. There is no specific request it can be handled. Why? Because it is a request coming from not with a specific protocol like your HTTP protocol cannot be used. It's a protocol independent. Generic servlet class can be handled any type of request because it is a protocol independent. And how this generic servlet will be, it will be implemented by inheriting the generate servlet class. I told as starting only. So the servlet, the second one, by inheriting generic servlet class, this can be implemented. The same thing here I am saying. You may create your generic servlet by inheriting the generates class, and each provides service method, or which provides or which implementing service method. But here I am saying the implementation is not going to be done with override. So if you see, what are the methods we are using? So actually so many methods we add. We don't have that much time to discuss. So which is the information we needed, that only I will specifically focus on. You know about it already. Which is the newer, that only I will discuss here. Init method, you know it. What is the purpose of init method? I don't want to describe 1 second to you. And here in another method, which is an important, I'm going to specifically this. What is that? Public abstract. This is a service method is providing an abstract method for which request? For incoming request. And automatically when a user requests, it should make a response. So for this it is going to make as a response. That's why I told the service method can be overridden, because it is a what type of thing? It's a type of abstract class. And similarly, you know about your destroy. No need to explain about what is the purpose of destroy. And this also we have done, getting the servlet configuration information and getting your servlet information, everything, configuration, and getting back what you configured. It is written in the form of object. So this is already is all our common methods which we are using for your first method. In addition to that, here we had some other methods. What is the some other methods is servlet context, get servlet context. So what is a servlet context? As a next topic you are having servlet config and servlet context. So what is the servlet context is, suppose if you had 3 servlets with you, example assume, I'm clearly briefing you what is the servlet context. If you had 3 servlets with you, one servlet is redirected to another servlet once the execution process has been done. These 3 servlet context information, if you try to make it as a one web application, you are writing only one web application, but in that one web applications you are trying to create 3 or 4 or 5 servlets. It depends upon the request which is coming from your client. Whole servlet context information is maintained, or I can say complete web application information if it maintains, we call it as servlet context. If you are maintaining a information about a servlet as a single, we call it as a servlet configure. Try to get the difference. I can show you a diagram also, as I have made it separate diagram. What is the difference between servlet config and servlet context? So context refers to whole web application. Config refers to individual application. So what is a best example? If I say, if you go to your supermarket they are going to make a bill for you, but the bill can be generated only for you or whatever you purchased. For that, you are going to generate a bill. It's called individual. But as the supermarket people is going to maintain a whole web application, it can be maintained thousand or lakhs of customer bills. Means you are maintaining information about complete servlet as a one application. We call it context. That is what a context. So once again, we are coming across in detail. Don't worry. Just I have given an example to you because at that time it can be reduces some work to me. So that's why I have given with an example. Right. So after that, get it parameters. So these are the common methods which we had it. So parameters, if you define what the parameter value of it, it can be written with a name, parameter name, what we are using, and returns all parameters. If what are the parameters you are using, you want to return for this you are using, and what is name of the servlet you are using, that can be written your servlet object. And here one more important thing is log. Log is nothing but what you are going to maintain one file. We call it as a log file. So what the log file is giving is it writes the given message, whatever you have given a message to the servlet, that each and every time the message can be log or maintaining in a file called as what? Log file. So similarly, suppose if you are maintaining a log file for each and every servlet which you have written, and that can be make or that can be written a complete explanatory message in the servlet log to make in order wise in a stock trace. It's nothing but first stack is a first in first out or last in first out, you know it. So as per according to that, it's going to maintain some explanatory messages in the form of stack trace. So for that, you need to call this message or you need to call the method is same, but just it's going to change its argument along with the string message. It's going to be throw in a order of stack trace. It's nothing but we are representing with a variable t. So this is about your second servlet, that is your generic servlet class. Now coming into my last and final is HTTP servlet class. I told this is one of the important and maximum we try to use this class only for implementing of your servlet. The reason I told it is going to use some specific methods which is defined by your protocol of HTTP. That's why the name itself is called HTTP servlet class. And what I just made it, the HTTP servlet class extends whom? The general servlet and implements your serializable interface. It extends one and it implements one, and it provides a specific methods like do post. You know what is a do get, do post, as we have seen two examples to find out the length of your string, to find out your area of circle. I just shown as a practical of your do get and do post, and in detail in the next coming slides we can have the comparisons, which is a more secure, which is a less secure, and what happens with the get and what happens post we are going to see in next coming slides. But just a remind, or just I want to make you remind that try to remember HTTP servlet class is specific to some of the methods. We call it as a do get, do post, or do head, or do trace. What it can do, we'll just discuss right now. And coming into first method, it's a common methods. You had it, service it is providing, and it's provides, just look at here, service without protocol and with protocol, right? You can just make it HTTP servlet request. It is not servlet request. So it dispatches the request to the protected service method by converting the request and response object into HTTP type. But what happens here? It is also receiving a request of service method, and it dispatches the request to which method you want. Which method? Either it can be do get, or it can be do post, or it can be do hide, or it can be do trace. Whatever the method is there, depending on that, it can be responded. Oh, that is a difference between normal service normal request and HTTP servlet request. And next, do get. As I told, do get, it handles a get request which is coming from the client, and it is also being invoked by your web container. Similarly, the post also, it is also be invoked by your web container only, and it handles your post request, right? So similarly, do head, we are going to discuss in front about it, don't worry. And if you want to handle any options request, it can be handled by your options. Put, trace, and delete, all these are some of the methods. We don't require to make all this in the discussion here, because some can be used, some cannot be used. It depends upon the sublet what you are using. Some of the examples I made here, what are the all methods we are using. Now coming to the main important thing, what we need to do is, what is the difference between your get and post? What is the difference between your get method and post method? I told already, these are the two important methods mainly we are focusing when we are using your HTTP servlet class. Now, as per example of which we discussed in previous class, we had some idea about get and post, but you see in detail about it, right? So first, coming into comparison of your get and post. So in case of your get request, only limited amount of data can be sent, because what is the reason? Everything whatever you have sent, that can be visible in your header, or that can be sent, because data sent to whom? To your header, not to the body. It can be sent to the header where we can easily identify. That's why I can't say this is not a secured method. But whereas in your post request, amount can be sent a large, because we are not sending information to your header. We are sending information to what? Body of your code. We cannot able to see what you are sending. So I can say this is the secured and this is your not secured. And why? Because the reason is then, because not secure, what I'm saying is, we can see in your URL bar. I just show you an example in my previous session. When I entered any string there, that string it can be visible over your header. But whereas if you take your post method, I can't see anything over my URL, because I'm sending the data to what? Body, not to the header. That's why this is not secured. At that time only I concluded that point. And this one is secured method. And whatever the request you are going to make, it can be bookmarked, and it cannot be a bookmark, because we can easily check it out by making a string with a question mark. The bookmark can be over the URL header, but this request cannot be bookmarked. And get request is redundant. So what do you mean it is? It means second request will be ignored. First, we need to complete our first request. Means first request is coming to you to execute any type of a request which is coming from your client. First, you need to solve it. Then you need to give back. Then only second request will be handled, or a second request will be considered by your get method. But whereas your post method not like that, it can handle multiple requests. So that's why I can say post method is non-idempotent. And coming into your get, and finally it's a more efficient. Why it's a more efficient? It can handle more, only one request at a time. Maybe it is insecure, or it's not a secured method, but I can say it is a more efficient, because it takes one request at a time and it responds to one request. But whereas your post method is somewhat less efficient, because it is a secure, but it can take more requests which are coming from your client. So at that time, sometimes it can overload it to your server. It leads a type of efficiency can be decreased in that case. So that's why I can say post method is somewhat less efficient than your get method. So this is what I can say, some of the comparisons which I made it between your get and post. And everywhere we are going to use our get and post method in your servlet. That also we can see right now. Now, coming into, I told we are going to discuss something about your configure and context, as just I have given to you. So Just the same thing we are going to discuss as a next. But before that, how many ways we can create our servlet? First, I can call a servlet interface, right? Servlet interface by using how many methods? How many methods? It's a briefing. I'm briefing what I have done as of now. I'm briefing. This is a briefing slide. What we discuss as above. First, I can use of my servlet interface. I can implement my servlet. That is the one method I had. And totally how many methods there I'm using? 5 methods. In that five, first three are cyclic and two are non-cyclic. That I have written here. And what is another method I had? Generic servlet. Using what class? Abstract I told just now. And similarly, HTTP servlet it can be implementing by using a duplicate and post method. So like this, I have concluded that there are three types of servlets we had and implementing and some of the methods we are using. Now, coming into my configure, I told what is meaning of servlet configure interface, where we are going to place this servlet configure information, right? So whenever, so before going to in detail about these methods and etc., so just I like to show first the differences between your servlet configure interface and servlet context interface. So just give me a second so that I can add one diagram which I made it for you easily for understanding purpose. Just give me a second. I'm going to share that with you. So hope just this is what methods. Methods is common everywhere. Methods is not important here. It is important as we are implementing a servlet, but methods we can just made it a reminder for us. But first we should know the difference between configure and context. So before going to comparison table, here I am just making one diagram for you. So what happens in the servlet context and config? Just look at here. When you are creating a servlet 1, we are maintaining separate servlet configuration here. For servlet 2, a second configuration means either you take, either it may be a servlet or it may be a JSP. For each and every application, what you develop, a separate servlet configuration information you are going to maintain with the help of your servlet config interface. But when you come to your context, context is a group of servlet configures, or I can say servlet config can be implemented individually, whereas servlet context is focusing on whole web application. That is only I'm trying to say as in my previous also. So now come to my differences. As I told, first point what? Servlet config object represents a single servlet. Just we have seen in my diagram that same thing. And coming to my servlet context, what happens? It represents the whole web application running on where? On JVM. You know what is a JVM? And common for all the servlets. And whenever I want to implement this servlet configuration, it's like a local parameter associated because we are implementing locally for each and every servlet for it. But whereas context coming, it's not a local. We are considering it as a global parameter, which is associated with whole application. And it's a name value paired. Where we are defining this one, we are defining in web.xml. This is what I call one of the we are going to maintain to description purpose. So it has defined your servlet configuration. So you have separately configuration files. I will show you, don't worry. I'll show you by opening your NetBeans. Separately at the last of your implementation of your project, there you can find some configuration files. After your meta info, web info, then after that we had some default package, then we had some information about your servers, then test case configuration files. At the time, this is also maintaining one web.xml for each and every servlet individual application that can be maintained as one web.xml. Similarly, the servlet context is also be maintained as a whole application, and it defined outside of servlet tag in web.xml only. It is outside of tag. There is no tags for this servlet context because it is not focusing on as individual. So I can't make it as any tags. And what is a method to config to servlets? We are using a method called get servlet config method to use. And for context, only we are using config, we are using context. And I told as an example previously to you. For example, a shopping cart of user is specific to the particular user. So here we can use what? Configuration. And to get MIME type. What is the MIME type? Multi-purpose internet mail exchange, not related to a single, because a mail exchanged between not one to one, one to many at the time, we are going to maintain one file, or we are going to maintain a application, and that complete application is going to be stored or maintained using your servlet context. So this is first, what are the differences we had between config and context, because if we know the difference, we will just easily understand the things which I am giving to you right now. So hope you understand the main differences. Now come back to our the presentation. What we are discussing is the difference between your config. Just give me a second. Yeah, this is what I need to discuss. So about what? Servlet config interface. So what is a servlet config? Just now I told a object of servlet config is created once again by the web container. Everything you remember everything, whatever the execution is taken place over your server, that everything will be contained by, or everything is maintained by your container. I told when I'm giving a first session, operations, or it may be init method, or it may be a destroy method, or it may be a service method, or any other application services, all are going to be maintained by your web container. And similarly, here servlet config is also be created by the web container only. And what is the purpose of this servlet config? Just now I told, to get configuration information about individual servlet, and it is also maintained in the file web.xml. And this is having one of the future, or I can say an advantage. What is an advantage is, suppose if any configuration information is modified by you. So initially you have given some configuration information, but later you need to change it, or you have changed the configure information. We don't require to change its servlet because it is not related to whole application, because it is a web application of a specific content modified from time to time. So we don't require, or we don't bother about it. That is what I can say, one of the core advantage of your servlet config, that we don't need to edit servlet file if information is modified. Which file you don't need to edit? Servlet file. You can do whatever you want in the WebXML, but we don't require to go for any changes over your servlet file. That is what we had a advantage of your servlet config. And these are the some of the methods we had. How the initialization we are doing. So what it is going to returns? It returns the parameter value. If you are using any parameters over your configuration, that parameter value can be written using this particular method. Similarly, if you are using not a single parameter, if you are going to use a group of values like enumeration data type, you know what is enumeration? More than one parameter value if you are trying to maintain of maybe a similar type, then we need to use our enumeration. I think you learned already in your C programming. Among your data types, primary data types, and we had derived data types, we had enumerated data types. Like this, in this enumeration data types if you are using. So that also be done with your servlet, what I can say, configure intervention by using these methods. And similarly, what is the servlet name you can use, and what is the context returns of your servlet context also we can take it down, not to relate it to a single. We can take whole application also you can use with by using calling of get servlet context information. So these are some of the methods we are using. So similarly, coming into how to get it, how to get your servlet configuration information, what you configured, you want to know. So you want to know that, simply you need to call get servlet configuration method. So automatically it's going to return an object. It's going to return an object of servlet configuration, which can be gives information about your what are the configuration you are using for that servlet in your web.xml, that can be easily returned by your object. This is about your servlet config. Now coming into my context, I told just now context is also written in object, but it is also be created by web container. But this information can be created when you are deploying the project. Why I am saying a deploying the project? Because context is not focusing on individual, context is focusing on whole web application. So that is the reason at the time of deployment you need to get this information, because there may be single servlet you had or maybe multiple servlets you had. Every servlet information you want to get, it means at the time of deployment stage only you can get back. So that's why at the time of deployment you are going to get the information. And here also this object used to get configuration from which file? Once again, from web.xml, but not in a tags, but not in a tags. And there is only one servlet context object for one web application, because it is related to whole application. So we had only one context file. So this information is going to be provided in where, in context parameter element. It's better to go for it. So information is shared to many servlets. So it is better to provide information in the web.xml only, but using what? Context para element, that where we can go for it. And finally, it's easy to maintain if any information is shared among all the servlets, because I told already it's not individual, it's a group. So easy to maintain what you have maintained information among your group. So it is better to make available to all the servlets. So what is going on? So it is also be make or it is also be maintained in your what file, in your web.xml only. So the information is changed. Once again, here also don't need to modify your servlet. So two same benefit we are getting for your config as well as your context, because the config and context is not anywhere related with your I can say in the execution issue. It's only for our sake. We are going to get the information, what is my servlet and what are the methods I'm using, what are the parameters. I told already, it's a description point we are maintaining. So if any changes are there, we don't need to modify any servlet. So if you take any modification to your servlet, but we need to mention your descriptor. So that is why it removes our problem of your maintenance. And here some of the things, servlet context object, lot of uses we had, some of the objects we had in. So first, the object of servlet context is what? Providing the interface between your web container and servlet. I told already, some understanding between container and servlet. And what is the purpose of it? It's used to get the information or configuration information about your whole web application. In which file? In the web.xml, right? And this servlet context object can be used to set or get attributes from web.xml. But what are the attributes? That is only the next topic what we are showing. So in your file, actually, we are going to maintain some attributes. So what are the attributes we had? Suppose you want to remove that attributes from that web.xml. we can make help of your servlet context. So that also we how we are going to make it, that we can see, and it provides some inter-application communication. Is nothing but if you want to go for any communication among your servlet to servlet, like your actually as in the next I told, there are two methods we had as a forward method, and once if your one servlet is forwarded and then only next servlet response will be taken and output will be printed, that we had as the next topics after your attributes of file. There are two types of execution will take place between your servlet to servlet. So like this, if you want to provide any interchaining application among your servlet to servlet, that is also be possible with your servlet object or servlet context object. This is, I can say, four advantages which we don't have any servlet config interface. So we mainly use config as well as the context, but based on that, which one is for which one is required for us at the time we are using, and these are the some of the methods we are using as what I just made it. So same init parameters is nothing but what return the parameter values which we are using in your servlet, right? And attributes, I know for a given object, as we want to remove or set or get attributes, for that purpose I can use it. And for that separately, this is for setting the attributes, for the getting the attributes, two methods we are going to separately make it. And similarly, if you want to make a group of parameters information, that also be get by using your public enumeration get into parameters names. And if you want to remove, here set, get, and remove. Three things we are doing. If you want to remove, that also be done and with using a method called public void remove attributes. So it's going to remove which we are using it. And how to get off your servlet context information. If you want to get an object, I told it returns object. But how you will get back your object? Using this method, get servlet context method is servlet config information which returns the object of your servlet context. So we want to get the object of you to get it back. So for that, we are going to get it your configure information of your servlet. And similarly, when you want to get generic class or generic class of try to use this method once again, it is also be used in another purpose. So it's going to get back your generate class returns the object of your servlet context. And what is the syntax we are going to make it as? So servlet context, as we call it as a method, sorry, we call it as an interface, and we are using with the method called, as I mentioned, get servlet context. So simulate is going to be written your required or what are the object we are focusing to get back, they're going to get it back. So this is about your configuration of your servlet and context of your servlet. So in the next information is a final conclusion. As I mentioned already in your PPT, the configure object refers to what? A single servlet, whereas servlet context object refers to whole application. This is what a conclusion I can make between config and context. So in the next session, we can see what are the attributes we are having. What are the attributes we are using in the servlet? We can just discuss. And as of now, any doubts on your side you can add, dear students? Any doubts you had? Just you can ask the doubts. If you have no doubts, just let me know in the chat box. Only one person responded. What about others? Clear? Yes? So fine. If it is clear, please post your attendance in the chat box and you can leave the session. Those who have given attendance, they can leave the meeting. Yes, Ali and Vaibhav. Ali Lolo and Vaibhav Kartikeya, you are not given your attendance. Just I will wait for 1 minute, then I will end the session. Vaibhav, you have not posted your attendance. Fine, I'm going to end the session. Hiba Darwish, now you join the session. Why? Utsav, now you join the session. Yes, Hiba, can you respond?